everybody. Following a national period of mourning, Queen Elizabeth's state funeral is set to take place on Monday at Westminster Abbey.
As with any royal event, there are strict protocols and procedures in place. So here to fill us in on what we can expect is author and historian Carolyn Harris. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Okay, Carolyn, let's start right from the beginning. What is a state funeral?
Well, a state funeral is the highest military honors that can be provided for a head of state or another prominent person. So we're going to see the Queen's coffin being carried on the gun carriage that was used during the reign of Queen Victoria. The Queen's grandfather, King George V, had a state funeral. He was head of state during the First World War. Her father, King George VI, also had a state funeral, head of state during the Second World War, and then most recently Prime Minister Winston Churchill in 1965. So this is a very rare honor for a very important person.
Okay.
Wow. So, I mean, we can understand how monumental this event is going to be, but take us through, what are the logistics of pulling something off of this magnitude?
The logistics are enormous because every country that the United Kingdom has diplomatic relations with has been invited to send two guests, generally a head of state and their partner, or an ambassador and their partner. And so the amount of security that needs to be provided and the amount of support for all these world leaders, that there's 2,000 people invited, 500 are these overseas VIPs. And some of these leaders, like the leaders of the Commonwealth, they're used to traveling in a bus together. William and Kate's wedding in 2011, apparently the Commonwealth leaders' bus was a lot of fun. And various representatives from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the Caribbean, they all got along together on the bus, and that's fine. But the President of the United States, the President of Israel, they expect enhanced security and not to be thrown on a bus with everyone else. So we have these logistics for different world leaders who expect differing amounts of security. Some are going on the bus and some will have their own vehicles.
So will specific members of the royal family have specific rules during the funeral?
Well, we are seeing the Queen's children standing vigil at the time of the laying in state in Westminster Hall. We're going to see the Queen's children and grandchildren in the procession. But the speeches at the funeral itself are going to be delivered by the Dean of Westminster, the Prime Minister Liz Truss, the Secretary General of the Commonwealth. The focus is going to be on the Queen's role as head of state, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith. We'll see more of a family presence at the much more private interment ceremony at St. George's Chapel.
Well, that's what I was going to ask about, because normally with regular people, when you have a funeral, usually there is a burial afterwards. If that's the way the person has chosen to go. Is that going to happen, or will that be public, or is that just a private?
There's going to be a burial, but it's going to be much more private because the burial takes place at St. George's Chapel, Windsor, where Harry and Meghan were married, so it's a very well-known place. But within the chapel, the King George VI Memorial Chapel is very small. In fact, the Queen's sister, Princess Margaret, had to be cremated, so there would be room for her in the chapel with her parents. So we're going to see the Queen being laid to rest, just with her family present, and she's going to be laid to rest with her late husband, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. They were married for 73 years. The Queen's parents, King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and the ashes of the Queen's sister, Princess Margaret. So some of the people who were the closest to the Queen in life will be there at the end.
Will she be interred with any jewels? And did she have a say in what she would actually be wearing, do you think?
Well, it's likely what she was wearing would have been discussed with her dresser, Angela Kelly, who's written some quite interesting books about what it's like to be the Queen's dresser and to choose her fashions. The Queen's not going to be buried with jewels. A lot of the royal jewelry collection is property of the state, particularly the crown jewels. So no, they would not be buried with members of the royal family. They'll be passed down to the next generations of working members of the royal family. It's it's unlikely we're going to hear about any particular personal wishes, but we do know previous monarchs did leave wishes. Queen Victoria wanted to be buried with an image of her late husband, Prince Albert. She was widowed for 40 years, and so wanted there to be that image there of Prince Albert. So we know previous monarchs did leave wishes of that kind.
But that won't be public.
No, it's unlikely that will be public anytime in the near term. In the long term, we may hear more about some of the behind-the-scenes details as more, decades pass.
So let's talk about what happens after the funeral. And I think a lot of people are already speculating, when will the coronation of King Charles III actually happen?
Well, for Queen Elizabeth II, it took 16 months between her accession, 6th of February 1952, and the coronation in June of 1953. There were a lot of reasons for this. There was the health of her first prime minister, Winston Churchill, and the political dynamics at the time. And there was also conditions in Britain after the Second World War. The Deanery of Westminster had been bombed, and it contained the anointing oil that was being used for the coronation. So more anointing oil had to be developed. So there were all these post-war issues. Logistical issues you wouldn't even think about came to the fore of organizing a coronation right after World War II and the Blitz and everything that had happened there. In contrast, on the Queen's father, George VI, his coronation was organized very quickly because his brother Edward VIII had abdicated. Plans were already underway for a coronation, and the new king simply stepped into his brother's shoes and was crowned very soon after the abdication crisis a few months later. So I think for Charles III, it will be somewhere in the middle. It won't be 16 months, so we won't need that much time to plan. And the 1953 coronation having been televised, there's a very clear blueprint. So the Duke of Norfolk organizes coronation, so he's got his work cut out for him in the months ahead.
He's working right now.
Working weekends, bringing all of this together. But it shouldn't take 16 months in the current climate. The Queen has reigned for 70 years, and sadly, it's likely been known that one day this day would come. So there's likely plans.
They've got the oil.
They've got the oil. Carolyn, so fascinating, because I know your breadth is very, it's deep into the history, so we really appreciate your insight. We really do. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Hey there! Wasn't that great? Do you know where you can find some equally good content? Our YouTube page. It's filled with discussions, debates, and some laughs. Head there now, like and subscribe.